Hello and welcome to this edition of Top of Mind Florida. Michael Williams here.
And I'm Brian Crowley.
And our guest today, Paige Shortsleeves, Executive Director of Peace. And it is an organization, we understand, that has chapters across Florida. Mm-hmm. And first, introduce yourself a bit. Tell us a bit about your organization and what Peace stands for. Take it away.
Yeah. So thank you guys for having me. My name is Paige Shortsleeves, and as you said, I'm the Executive Director of Peace. Peace stands for People Engaged in Active Community Efforts. Peace is a lot easier to say than that. And so I'm actually a snowbird early in my lifetime. I'm from Maine, so I made the journey down in 2017. I fell in love with no snow, and I've been here ever since and all the craziness. But really I was brought here by a job, a different job, and saw really the disconnect between what was happening on the ground in real people's lives and what they were experiencing in poverty, and then what decisions were being made about their lives from a political standpoint, and just really seeing the disconnect and seeing how helpless people felt in that. At the time, I was working at a food bank. And I also was working in DC, and so I was writing mental health policies. At the time, I was 21 years old, writing policies for places I had never been. And I was like, why are they trusting me? I love my job. I think it's great, but why are they trusting me to do this and not the people with real lived experience? And so someone sent me a community organizing job, and I said, I don't want to work in politics. Why are you sending me this? And then I sat through the information session, and the rest is history. So I started as an organizer in 2019, and I've been doing this ever since. And so, like you said, Peace we work in Palm Beach County, but we have sister organizations across Florida. There are about 14 in every major county or city. So like Miami-Dade, Broward, Hillsborough, Pinellas, basically every major county. And what we do is we hold systems and elected officials accountable for the fair treatment of everyone, not just those in power, those with money, those with privilege. So how do we use people and our power of thousands of people to say to our sheriff or county commissioners or whoever it is, the school system, whatever, no, things are not right, people are suffering, and here's how you could change it. And so that is a little bit about what we do in a nutshell.
That's a lot of a little bit. It sure is. No, thank you for that introduction.
Yeah.
So how do you accomplish these goals?
Yeah. So we are committed. What we say is we do two things, listening and action. It's very easy to want to rush into action, but if you don't listen to what's happening, you can't. And so we start every year by listening to what is happening in the community. And I don't mean what's on Facebook or what's on the news. I mean, what is happening to real people in your lives. So we actually are wrapping that up right now. We call it the listening process. That for us runs August to September. And so we are holding about 100 listening meetings across Palm Beach County right now, in churches, in people's homes, in libraries, wherever people feel safe. And we're asking, what is happening in your life or the lives of others you love? And as you can imagine, we hear everything. It ranges from education, immigration, healthcare, mental health, really the gamut, right? And so what the story I'll tell to illustrate how this works is back in 2016, Peace began to hear stories of people who were being pulled over and they were perceiving those stops as racial profiling. So we heard stories from some of our Black members, especially a Black pastor I work with. He would get pulled over outside of his church. He works in a bad neighborhood, quote unquote. He drives a nice car. He gets pulled over once a week. And not for doing anything. They just ask him, why are you in this neighborhood? And then they let him go. That's it, right? And then some of our Hispanic members were talking about law enforcement would sit outside of some of their Hispanic grocery stores and wait for them to leave the parking lot, assuming they didn't have a driver's license. Not always the case, right? And so what was happening in these stories and what people were sharing is I had this negative interaction and I no longer feel safe to call 911 or to go to law enforcement when I need something. So there's a young woman I work with. She was robbed walking home. The first thing I asked her was, why did you call 911? And she was like, no, because I was scared that they would think I did something wrong, not that something wrong happened to me. And that's something I've never had to think about, right? She's an immigrant. That is a part of her story. And so we said, okay, this is bad for all of us. If people of color do not trust law enforcement, they're not participating in jury duty, they're not calling 911 when they need help. So how do we make it so people can bridge that trust? And so that year, those listening sessions, all of our peace members got together and voted, our democratic process, voted on what they wanted to work on. And that year, they voted to work on racial profiling and policing. And so that is, as you just, enormous. Where do you go with that? And so what I often tell our folks is we pick the piece we can do something about. We're not going to fix the entire problem, but what is the thing we can put our pulse on, we can touch? And so what that looked like with this campaign was that we began to do research, right? We listened, we have the lived experience, but what does this look like from data perspective? What does this look like from experts, from professors at different colleges? Like, what are they seeing? So that year and more years, we began to do research into what does racial profiling actually look like? Like, what does that policy look like? Or doesn't look like. And so we met with professors out of like Northeastern University, FIU, FAU. We met with different county folks. And one of the things we quickly realized was that in Florida, law enforcement is not required to track non-arrest or non-verb or written warning. So if I am stopped and I am given a verbal warning, right, there's no ticket of that. There's no record that that interaction ever happened unless the officer is wearing a body cam, which, again, that just varies department by department. And so what is happening is those are the stops, right, where racial profiling is more likely to happen according to data. And there's no record, right? We would go to law enforcement and say, these aren't happening because we don't have the data to say it. And so we said, okay, so let's collect the data. You can't address the problem if you don't know you have the data, you're looking at it, right? And at the time, this is back in 2016, 2017, we were talking to police chiefs because Sheriff Bradshaw would not talk to us at the time. We went through about a 5-year period where he would not respond to emails. He would not call us. We did prayer vigils outside of his office, and he would not speak with us. And we really had a moment of, here's an elected official that represents Palm Beach County, and he is not talking to 40,000 people that peace represents. And that's not okay. And we really had to grapple with that of, are we going to let this keep going, or are we going to hold the sheriff accountable for fair treatment of everyone? And that is what we decided to do. So when the sheriff was up for re-election in 24, we used that. And so we knew he was looking for votes, right? So we held our first ever candidates forum. We had never done it before. We said we had no idea what this looks like, but let's do it. We invited every candidate to address this problem of, if you are elected, will you track data? Easy, should be easy. Every candidate came but Sheriff Bradshaw. And that night, we have a policy at peace meetings. On the stage are chairs, and you can see, I'll send a photo. And that night, there was a chair for every candidate on the stage with their name on it. And every candidate was there. Sheriff Bradshaw's chair sat empty the whole night. And so the front page of the Post, Palm Beach Post the next morning was, candidates talk race relations, but where was Sheriff Bradshaw? And as you can imagine, he was mad. And he called us immediately, like as soon as that dropped, went from not talking to peace to calling us and saying, I will meet with you, I will talk about, like, yes. And that really changed our entire relationship with him, frankly, of him seeing us as someone who, as a group that has power in relation to him, and I respect you. And so we had a meeting with Sheriff Bradshaw. It was like 3 days before Christmas. And when you work with churches, that is hard. But we packed a church with 100 people. And Sheriff Bradshaw walked in and immediately tried to walk out because he did not think there were going to be 100 people in that room. And he came back, he sat down, and we said, hey, you have a problem. Listen to these stories of lived people, right? These are people who shared their testimony of what it was like to be pulled over, to be racially profiled, and what that has meant for their lives down the line. And we asked him, will you track this data? He said, let me think about it, let me talk about it, but I will come to your big event. And so every year we have what we call the Nehemiah Action Assembly. That is our big event. We bring about 1,500 people together, and Sheriff Bradshaw came for the first time ever in Peace's 31-year history at that time. And I will be the first to admit I did not believe he would come until he was on the stage. And he announced he was tracking the data. And we are waiting right now, today. I actually was texting him this morning for a meeting. We're going to have a summary meeting in the winter about where, like, the actual looking at the data that they have been tracking of where is racial profiling happening, what officers are doing it, and what do we do about that now? And so that is how we work.
Where are some of the, as we look at the issues you face, how does our current environment that we're dealing with and living with change some of the complaints you're getting and some of the concerns you have and some of the things you're trying to focus on now?
Yeah, that is a great question and a big question. I think that, so at Peace, we focus local. Like that has always been our mantra. Like we work with the sheriff, right? We go after the school board, the county commissioners. And so when you talk about immigration, for example, which is a federal thing, it becomes incredibly hard for us to, we can't fix an immigration system, right? And so one of the things we are internally talking about right now is we're not going to repair an immigration system. We can't. But what are the things we could fix locally to make it so people can go to get the health care they need, maybe, even regardless of immigration status, right? I will say on the positive, I have had more people reach out for ways to get involved than I have in all of the years of me doing this.
But immigration's a top item right now.
Yeah. And cost of living is the other one, I would say. Affordable housing is one we're already working on, as everyone knows. But just kind of mixed in cost of living about like insurance, health insurance, groceries, gas. People are working 3-4 jobs literally to make ends meet, barely make ends meet. And I think about like the stories we hear of like moms, dads who are working 3-4 jobs, kids that are having to put themselves to bed because mom and dad are working because they have to, right? And how, as a kid, do you go to school if you don't have food? How are you learning on an empty stomach? How are you learning if you're sleeping in a U-Haul van in a parking lot? And these are the stories that are reality in Palm Beach County. It's very easy, right, to look away, look towards the beach, look towards everything that's nice, and ignore a lot of the broken that is here. But there are also people that are trying, right, to fix it. Yeah.
Right.
So what is your impression of the kind of leadership we're getting out of Tallahassee on dealing with these issues?
Yeah, so Peace has been working with some of our state senators and state representatives, Senator Berman, Snyder. We were working with former Representative Caruso, and some of the others. I have found that our local representatives have been very receptive. We're talking to them specifically around mental health care. That is a nonpartisan issue. Does not matter what side of the aisle, mental health care matters, right? And so when we go in a room and can sit with them and say, hey, here we are as your representative, like you represent us. Here is what is happening on the ground. We need you to go to Tallahassee and make sure we get more mental health dollars or more dollars for
whatever. And are they accomplishing that?
So we are actually, we're working on that. So we are going to Tallahassee for the first time. Peace is going up for committee week in November, and we are working with our state senators and representatives right now to get an appropriation for mental health dollars in this year's or 2026 budget. So we'll see how it plays out, but I'm excited because we've never done it before. This is a first for us, but also we're about to bring 50 people on a bus from Palm Beach County up to Tallahassee to meet with their representatives in the Capitol, something that a lot of those people have never done before. And so I'm excited for them to get their story in that way and hopefully win millions of dollars that we need for mental health here.
You've touched on it, but talk a little more deeply about getting people off the sidelines to get engaged, whether it's with an organization like yours or something else. Talk about the backstory that fundamentally, not just here, but here in your heart, makes you say, I'm going to do this tough work.
Yeah. I think every person has their reason, but I think you're right. It comes down to heart. And so for me, I can pinpoint an exact moment, right? I was pre-med. I was in college in Maine, and my college had a month program where the Jan term, and I frankly wanted to pad my resume and started working at a homeless shelter at that time, and it changed everything for me. It is why I'm here today, and why I did not go to med school. I was working in Maine at a homeless shelter during the heroin epidemic, which obviously was bad here. But when you're dealing with 1 million people in an entire state, I was one of the people whose job was responding to overdoses. I was dealing with 10 overdoses a day in a state of 1 million people. And at the time, my job went from a month to 2 years, but my job was literally adding people's name to a wait list, knowing that they were going to die. Because at the time, the state of Maine only had 10 beds for people who needed to detox from heroin. And if you aren't detoxing in a detox center, you're not detoxing, or you're not doing it safely. And so I literally watched people I knew and loved die because of policy choices. And just watching that and realizing the reason people don't care, frankly, is because these people are homeless. And that changed everything for me. And so to your question, I think people have to have those moments. How do we create those moments it might not be as dire of people literally dying, but when you're watching loved ones struggle to make ends meet, when you're watching a grandmother have to move back in with her grandkids because she can't afford medicine and rent, when you're watching your neighbors be taken by ICE who have been here for 35 years, a lot of people have a gut reaction to that. And every person, that trigger is different, right? I work with some people who right now they're having that moment, even though I've been working with them as a volunteer for 10 years. They saw something this year that triggered that. And so I think it's paying attention, not being overwhelmed by what's going on, which is hard, and plugging in, right? What is the one thing that I can do this month? You're not going to save the world in a month, but what's the one thing I can do? Whether it's donating $5, whether it's showing up at one volunteer event, what is the one thing I can do this month? And so there are ways people can plug into Peace to do that. There are ways they can plug into other nonprofits. But it's taking that first step is really what I found is what is important.
So a law was passed that removes homeless from county parks and all over the state. What impact has that had on the homeless? How are we taking care of them now?
That's a good question. So Peace actually did a press conference about that bill last year when it came out, because we are very worried about that. I don't have the data in front of me, but we have been told that arrests are up for homelessness in Palm Beach County and across the state. We know that. But in Palm Beach County specifically, data is up showing that more people are in jail right now because of being homeless than were last year. So we know it's happening, right? And when you talk about people being arrested, that's not helping them. It might give them a bed for right now, but you're also giving them a criminal record, which then means that they can't apply or a lot of jobs are off limits, housing's off limits, food stamps, right? Or just people will not take their application in general. But then also you have to pay a fine or a fee. It's $500. If you're homeless, you don't have that, or a lot of people do not. So how are you paying your fine or your fee? You're not, right? And so we're seeing this impact, and what it frankly is doing is pushing a lot of people further underground than they already were.
So what are you trying to do about it?
So Peace is working on affordable rental apartments, because we know homeownership obviously is American dream. It is not reality, right? And so Peace right now is working on a proposal with the county commissioners that would require developers, similar to the workforce housing program, but developers would be required to build low-income housing, a set number based on a formula for people making less than 60% of the area median income, which is about $65,000 in Palm Beach County. So what we are pushing is that if a developer is building 100 luxury units, 10 of them should be set aside for people making low income, right? And especially because the county is giving them tax breaks, is giving them tax incentives and things like that.
I must say your dynamism and passion, and a reminder that our younger generations are out there on the front lines. Sometimes we can be stereotypical about what's the younger generation doing, is impressive. Final thought for our audience this morning.
Yeah, I would say don't get overwhelmed. It is easy to get overwhelmed. It is easy to, the first thing I do is look at the news in the morning. It is easy to get overwhelmed. Find the one thing that you can do today, right? I can give $5 to an organization that I support and skip the $5 Starbucks, right? Or I'm going to sign up for a 1 volunteer shift. Find the thing for you. It doesn't have to become your life mission. It doesn't have to become the thing you spend 40 hours doing, but make it the one thing you're going to do this month. Because organizations like Peace and organizations like the other hundreds of nonprofits out there need volunteers, people showing up and standing up.
Paige Shortsleeves, Executive Director with Peace, thank you so much for taking time to be with us and our audience this day.
Yeah. Thank you all. Thank you for having me.
Well, one of the interesting things listening to her was about, immigration she brought up. And, we have huge immigration issues now in Florida. We have them all across the country. But recently there was a story in the Orlando Sentinel how farmers in the citrus groves and everything are hurting trying to find workers. And even apparently workers that have the visas that allow them to work are not showing up in the fields because they fear getting picked up anyway and sent away. We had David Goodlett on not too long ago, who represented the sugar industry for a very long time. And he talked about, the problems with immigration in Florida. And for somebody who's somebody who had voted for Trump 3 times and is now deeply opposed to this immigration policy that's going on in the country right now, everybody agrees with removing, the pedophiles and the murderers, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. But there's a lot of concern about individuals being removed who are just hard workers, and it's starting to hurt some of the farms in Florida.
Brian, I was, perhaps because my children are essentially her age, in their 30s, on a slightly different topic. I was heartened by the fact that it still comes down to people getting out on the front lines, getting engaged. You could not help but sit and listen to her, or any young person who decides to come off the sidelines and get involved. And that gives you some optimism.
Oh, sure. Yeah. No, it's good to see that. It's good. And she's very passionate about what she does, and that's nice to see too. She's also, her organization in Palm Beach County and throughout Florida, they trying to help the homeless, who often we drive by them but don't pay much attention to them.
But how is it's still a tough nut to crack? Certainly you have somebody like Paige very deeply involved. But when it comes to election time, we're always talking about the fact that getting out the youth vote still seems to be a very tough one to crack. Why does that continue to be so, at least broadly speaking?
Oh, I think that's historically always been true, that it's hard to get young people to come out to vote. There seem to be some indications that there may be a little more interest this time. And I think that college campuses are starting to become a little more active in politics. But we'll see. It's hard to predict. Again, I think a lot will have to do with the economy, even for them.
What else? Gesundheit.
Yeah, Gesundheit.
Just back from Switzerland. He's just back from.
I don't know where that came from.
I shouldn't have started that. It was interesting.
That Switzerland nose, it just causes quite the smell.
You sound like you're on Mary Poppins. I don't know. I keep thinking of downtown London. Talk a little bit, Brian, about as we point ahead to the next year. You've talked a lot recently about the fact for all the issues that are out there and so much coming at us like a tsunami every day. You always boil it down to, and she talked about this herself, affordability. And I remember thinking that's something Brian talks about, that at the end of the day, for all the other issues, Floridians will vote on their pocketbooks ultimately.
Sure. Look, anybody who goes grocery shopping today knows that they're spending a lot more for groceries than they were a year ago. And it's not just that the price of the grocery has gone up, the quantity has gone down. So you buy toilet paper, and it's smaller rolls, thinner rolls, and the price has also gone up. And you can pick a whole host of items where that has happened. In Florida, you add to it the enormous increases they've had in homeowners insurance, and we've also created a situation where, as she pointed out, and people have been talking about this for quite some time, the lack of affordable housing throughout Florida, and it's becoming a really big issue. Some people are leaving Florida because they simply can't afford to live here, not because of the cost of groceries, but because they can't afford to buy a house. Housing prices, they're starting to stabilize. They're starting to go down a little bit. The market seems to be indicating. But overall, housing prices are far, far higher today than they were 3, 4, 5 years ago. So that makes it harder if you're a young couple or a middle-aged couple that's with kids trying to find a place to live.
To be clear, this doesn't suddenly mean that in 2026, whatever the issues may turn out to be, and as you rightly say, a year plus out from the big gubernatorial race, we can't possibly know how that'll shake out. But it doesn't mean we're going to suddenly turn from a red to a blue state, but the dynamics will be interesting about how all this shakes out.
Oh, we're not going to turn into a blue state anytime soon.
Right.
That's not going to happen.
No matter what kind of economic pain people may be suffering.
No. And I think that that doesn't mean that a Democrat couldn't win the governor's race or the U.S. Senate race.
Sure,
it's also coming up next year, or the 3 cabinet races that are coming up next year.
Well, that's interesting. So you see, well, of course, anything's possible.
Anything's possible,
right.
sure.
But fundamentally, it doesn't change what's been a 25-year arc into a red state.
Ever since Jeb Bush won election in 1998, the Democratic Party has been choking and dying, and it not only has lost all of the statewide races, but the legislature has a supermajority Republican. A lot of local governments are Republican now. A lot of school boards are Republican now, even though they're nonpartisan. We're a very strongly Republican state. I mean, most of the blue counties have turned red, so that's what voters want.
So somebody listening to you and knowing your background in politics, and I find this fascinating. Red state, clearly, but you can't rule out, which in a literal sense, of course you can't, but you still think there's a needle that can be threaded at the top of the heap, the top statewide office, where a Democrat could find that strange alchemy that at least for that one place, that one race, have a breakthrough. I think people would find that fascinating and say, well, there's no way. You just said it's a red state.
Well, one thing that we lose sight of is that, yes, we're a red state, but if you throw in the independents and you add them to Democrats.
Yeah, they're about a quarter of the vote, independents.
Well, independents are almost a third of the vote, but a little less than a third, somewhere between a quarter and a third. I have to look at the numbers again, see what they're
Sizable.
up to now. But a couple of million anyway.
Oh, easily, yeah.
So, but what I'm saying is that if you take that independent number and you add it to the Democrats, well, the Republicans are the minority party. Now, flip that over, take the independents and add them to the Republicans, and, well, the Democrats are even a smaller minority. But independents are, a big chunk of the state, but they don't get to vote until the general election because we have closed primaries. And as someone who always believed in closed primaries, it never made sense to me why I've always been registered as no party. The idea that I should vote for a Republican or a Democratic nominee in the primaries made no sense to me. If I wanted to do that, I should register for one of the two parties. But I think that we become so splintered that maybe open primaries where you'd have to talk a little more toward the middle because you're trying to influence independent voters. Whether you're Republican or Democrat, maybe there's less screaming on both sides if they have to work toward the middle to win a primary election. So I don't know. I don't see it happening anytime soon, but it may be that open primaries may be the solution to getting us a little calmer in the future.
Snowball's chance, perhaps, in the sunshine state of it
you never
happening. But
know.
interesting, though.
You
And
never
interesting that your perspective as somebody who's lived, breathed, and with a horrible Swiss accent talked about this for decades. You know I'm not going to be able to forget that today.
Not many do forget it, but anyway.
No, but it is interesting, though, that somebody's analyzed the political scene sort of come around, at least hypothetically, to perhaps with changing times, changing needs, to get voices out there and to perhaps dial down the temperature of our political debates in campaign season. I find that interesting.
Yeah, we have to dial it down somehow. We can't keep having this screaming at each other. It just doesn't work.
Always appreciate the perspective. Final thought for our audience at Top of Mind Florida this edition.
Well, I just want to give a shout out to Darlene. Darlene Gostrub watches us every week. She comments, she sends emails to my wife every week, tells us how she thinks the show is wonderful. Darlene is a wonderful person. She's very kind. Her and Cheryl are the best of friends, and I really appreciate the fact that she spends some time listening to Top of Mind Florida.
And Darlene, just one request. Can you help him with the accent for the next broadcast? No. And by the way, Darlene helped put us in touch with our guest this day, Paige Shortsleeves.
Exactly.
Thank you very much, my friend, for everything, as always, the perspective, and a little bit about your world adventures as well. That's it for us in Top of Mind Florida.